everybody. I welcome you back to the show. This is episode 3, and our guest, as you can see on the screen, is Aaron Monkman. I met Aaron, and what's it been? Three or so years ago.
Yeah.
We were essentially work spouses, and I think we spent more time together with each other than we did our own families. Got to know him pretty well, and then one of the reasons that I asked him on the podcast because I know he's kind of, had life kick him in the nuts, and he's bounced back and, been a pretty successful human being since then. So if you want a little more info, obviously you can hit the show notes, a little more detail in there. But other than that, Aaron, let's hear the story.
Cool. Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's always helps to be able to, talk through things. As we know, what we do ended up, you end up losing people to some pretty significant emotional events.
Yeah.
That's kind of the basis of, the show here. So I'm glad to and honored to be on. My survivor story, I guess, if you want to call it that, centered on my life-changing event that occurred when I was about 10 years old. And my dad contracted a disease called amyloidosis. At the time, it wasn't found to be like hereditary. Don't know the current data on it, but at the time it infected 1 in 8.5 million people.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't any rhyme or reason to it. It just went, hey, you. So, I guess that can either be a comfort to certain people or it can be frustrating to certain people. It was kind of both, throughout the long period of time that, me and my family mourned. Very unexpected because, he was always athletic, didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't have a whole lot of vices, just a generally very healthy person, even into his 40s. And then, when he was 45, when he finally passed. It was a significant change for me and everybody in my family. Not only was he, the main breadwinner, he's a construction contractor. So we lived, very comfortably. I wouldn't say wealthy, but, my mom got to stay home. She always says that was the best time in her life because she got to spend time with her kids, spend time with her husband. She went back to work, eventually to be a police officer within the time that he was sick. And then, after he had passed.
How long did he struggle with the disease?
It was by the time he really started to show signs of what he thought he was just out of shape. What the disease does is it releases a protein into your bloodstream from it's a bone marrow disorder.
Okay.
Does is it eventually attacks your organs. Got his kidneys first, and then eventually what he passed of was heart failure. Not because his heart wasn't working anymore, but because his heart got muscular and it eventually closed up the medical term. I'm sure Mel's in the other room listening and laughing at me trying to figure it out, but closed up what valves. Yeah, there she goes. Closed up the valves, and that's what he eventually passed from. Okay. So about 8 months to a year from the time he got a diagnosis from Mayo Clinic to when he actually passed.
So it's relatively fast then.
Yeah. Me being 10 years old, I really didn't, you understand, but you don't really get it until a little bit later. Obviously me going through, adolescence and being a young man right after that, that's when I really started to miss him. And then really like the healing process, I was always more comfortable talking about it. It was a way to keep him around. And we had those connections through athletics.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing baseball and soccer at the time, which he never did play. And then my senior year of high school, I got to play football, first football team in school history. And that really it made people emotional. Like my grandparents got to watch me play. And a couple other people. And that was, a pretty strong, connection. There's, you saw the picture that I had, up in my office, my grandfather, my dad, and then me, all playing same picture, stiff arming people. So I always had that connection. And whether it was, fitness or sports, I always had that kind of connection with him. And to kind of make sense a little bit more, he was a good athlete, not always the most graceful athlete. but in his mind, there was nobody that couldn't be beaten. If he couldn't beat you physically, he'd go after you mentally. And he even did it to me when I was a little kid. Like, I didn't beat him in anything. I was 0 and 5,000. Yeah, no, nothing, zero, not
Yeah,
even
I
like,
never let my kids win. Even tic-tac-toe. I don't let them
yeah,
win.
zero things. Like,
Yeah.
it made up game where we were like using a tennis ball playing. And I remember this too, using a tennis ball as a soccer ball. And he was a goalie in the doorway, 0 goals, lost, made sure I knew it. And yeah, it's actually part of the reason I'm such a lunatic when at certain points when things get a little bit difficult. I still blame him for that one, which is just the easy answer. But yeah, he was that kind of person. So he was not only an athlete, but very mentally strong human being. There wasn't anything that could be conquered or couldn't be conquered. Wasn't any person that he could beat. And there was a friend of his that actually played, about a season and a half in the NBA, who said like about him, like there wasn't a single person that he could, step on the court with and not believe that he could beat. So that was always really like the crux of how he approached, athletics, fitness, and then, life in general. But it wasn't really until, I started getting more into endurance, like even a couple years, few years in the Army before I met you and a couple other people that really got me into endurance and that kind of fitness, that I don't want to say like, the healing was really completed, but that really kind of made the strong connection to him. I use the line now that, with some of my guys that I was in command with, just getting them to try things. I was like, man, you would be shocked what you're capable of. Like, I wasn't always this way. Like I wasn't always being, able to beat a lot of people on distance rounds. I wasn't always able to outlift everybody, but sometimes the first step is just trying it.
Right.
And then, when I met you, little bit out of shape. And then, started getting a little bit lighter through, a shred program that I had gotten for my buddy, lightened the load a little bit.
Well, you were trying to, get that 6-pack abs for your wedding, I believe was the reason you were shredding.
Yeah. One of the total absolute vanity. That was definitely one of the big ones. But then, you hit the turnaround point and you're like 15 pounds lighter than you were a month and a half ago. And you're like, oh, this is better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started to do that. And then probably the first Spartan race that, did with some of the guys. It was like, I was cramping up at like mile 6, mile 7, probably didn't do things, quite the right way. I was like, all right, maybe the super distance, super distance races maybe not my thing. But then we went down to Florida and did this one. And, you and his name escapes me, your first BRC partner.
Mueller.
Yeah, Mueller. Us three finished in like the top 3% of like the open category.
We were pretty high up there. Yeah.
And annihilated it. And then, you start to think like, oh, maybe I can do this. And that one really kind of took me back to, my dad and, really kind of, and like I said, don't want to say like really finish the healing process, but then he was always, also one of those guys that would try things like, he wrote a movie script and sent it out to LA on a whim. Like he would try anything. Like he would just be like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And that was the exact opposite of, the people where, we grew up, think. They're very kind of closed-minded. They want to stay in the little box and be happy in the little box and die in the little box.
They like to be in their comfort zone. They don't want to ever step out.
Yes. Huge thing. And I was that way too. Like I didn't like playing sports that I wasn't good at. I didn't like doing things that I wasn't automatically good at. Still kind of that way, but I'm a lot, better about it now. Especially stepping into the, endurance fitness world. A little bit less on CrossFit. That's because I'm awful at gymnastics. Yeah.
I think everybody's terrible at CrossFit. Let's just be real.
If I see running in it, then I'm like, all right, I'm good. And then if there's not running in it, then I was like, oh, I'm about to suffer and not look too great. What's the scale? This? That's pretty much everything these days. Mel's good at it. But started to get into some of those races and distances, and he would just kind of try things. He never did endurance stuff, but that would be one that I'm sure if he was still around that we would probably go out and do together, even though he would be in his 60s now, almost 70. But then took the next step and did a half marathon, I think like the next week. And again, finished pretty well in my age group without really training that hard for it. And then after those first couple steps, and the foray into more endurance type stuff, and then met up with one of the officers in the unit I'm with now, who had run cross country in college, and really kind of fine tuned a couple things and did a train up, and then annihilated my time from the previous year, just kind of through his mentality, and then kind of keeping his memory alive, and then also kind of doing the right thing by his legacy, I guess, to try and keep him around, which I guess is something that we all do, in the military, or you'll have those people that you look up to, but this one in particular goes back to my dad and that real significant event that happened when I was younger, and though it was a long process and usually never finishes, fitness and athletics in general were how I connected with him, even though he was gone, and then kind of helped really finish that healing process, and realize that what I know about him, what I've collected from his family members and friends that I've met and spoken to, that he probably would have been pretty proud of how everything turned out. And then his grandson getting into more athletics now, that he would have really enjoyed. Some people try and kind of steer away from that, and everybody's got a different healing process, but I would say, especially for me, to not run away from it, and then embrace it, and then try new and different things, and kind of talk to people about how they would have felt about it, definitely helped me through it. And I'd like to say I'm in a pretty good place about it. It's all these Disney movies lately, they have things with, I think it was Onward was the one where get to see your dad for a day after he had passed, and that one stabs you right in the heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think something, just not just the athleticism part of it, but I think, and you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I think something that you obviously took away from your dad was, like you said, he would just try new stuff. It didn't really matter. Who writes a script and sends it to Hollywood?
Yeah.
I mean, you are just, when you could have just clammed up and kind of went into yourself and just, sat in your room and done nothing, you kind of followed your dad in his footsteps of what, I'm going to try this. Oh, that's not too bad. And I'm going to do this. Well, I wasn't too bad at that either. So I think what it does is that it's this train of confidence building. And then it's at a certain point, you're just oh, you want to do that? Yeah, great. Whatever. Let's go do it. You build that confidence out of trying so many different things that you're just whatever, let's go. We'll crush this.
Yeah, that one I definitely picked up a little bit more from you, when I started to get back in more hey, what are you doing this afternoon? And whatever we had done that morning with some of the trainees, it was hey, what are you doing this afternoon? And we'd kind of do it publicly to kind of nudge some of the people that should work out. But I think that was something that you had talked on previous episodes too. You never know who is drawing inspiration from other people. I think that, along with all right, dad's watching somewhere, I can't quit right now. Absolutely not. But you stop being afraid of the suck and the hurt, and as kind of a testament to people that you've lost, or getting over that, you can then kind of use it also in turn to help other people. So like to say mine's not a very there were some negative times, but not a very negative story. I'm definitely not the only person that's dealt with loss, and especially not that kind of loss, when they lose their father young. But it can be pretty significant, especially for young men, especially going into adulthood right at that critical time. But it definitely always helped for being the example that he would have wanted me to be, and then also now, like you said, on that, you know, train or ladder or however, you know, whatever example you use of
Yeah.
confidence. All right, yeah, why not? Let's go do that. Then we might as well suffer today. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like, you said you're not the only person that's ever lost their father when they were young. And
Yeah.
obviously a lot of people that happens, unfortunately, but I think that your story really kind of shows it that, like, instead of just obviously grieve because it's a huge loss, but honor that person, whether it's your mother, your father, your brother, like honor them through your actions. And that's what you did. Like, you're like, you know what? Like, you were young and you lost your father, but it's like, my father's legacy lives on through me. And like the things that you were doing because of him is now affecting your son. And he's doing the same thing. So it's like you're just extending the legacy of your loved one. And again, not just for you, but all those other people listening who've lost a mother, father, brother, like you can extend their legacy on by honoring the things that they did or the things that they taught you and whatever it is. And I think that's the true story here is like, just don't let, their loss get you down, but you can take the things that they did and they loved. And, maybe it's your niece or your nephew, because you lost your sister or whatever, like you can show them what their mother was like or their father was like through their legacy. And I think that's the important lesson to really kind of take away from, losing somebody so young. So,
And then I think for one, especially, you know, people in the military probably experience this more often than any, you know, than the average person, because who wakes up at 5:30 in the morning and goes and runs 5 miles. I go home and I tell people like, oh yeah, I'm doing the half marathon. And they're like, why?
you're
And
paying for that? Like, why?
yeah, paying for your own suffering.
Yeah.
But it's just like, but when you think about it in that context of, you know, where you, me, a couple other people, to continue our motivation, we compare ourselves to people that are, you know, that would annihilate us in any kind of thing, so we can keep pushing that. But then you think about, you know, the average person who, you know, hasn't gone out and done that, you know, hasn't gone out and pushed themselves, or, you know, hasn't found something that they can kind of focus some of their, you know, grief or loss in. They think you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Fact.
or that it's like, you know, you're a superhero for, you know, going out and, you know, I think one of the breaks I had, I ran 8 miles to my buddy's gym, and then worked out with him and did a partner workout with somebody. It hurt my feelings, but uh, just the fact that, you know, that thought would, you know, occur in my head. There's like, what's the matter with you? So I think that's another one where, you know, you can use that, you know, the examples, or, you know, you see, you know, some of these Olympic times where, you know, people are breaking a 2 hour marathon, or can't remember the name, but the lady that broke the American record for the Chicago Marathon recently, 2 hours and 8, like that is unbelievable. And like
Yeah. Her
that, yeah,
average mile pace is faster than I can run a single mile, let alone 26 miles.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's
I think,
unreal.
like if I try to match even one of those miles, and she does it for 26. But yeah, but then when you think about it, you know, you think about the average person every once in a while, you know, it kind of helps in that other direction. So, you know, if I, you know, miss a few workouts, or, you know, do a couple things where, you know, you get busy or whatever life throws at you, you start, you know, like, man, I was so much better like 3 months ago. But then you think about, you know, sometimes where some people that don't have that motivation, or don't have, you know, that, you know, other piece to their, you know, their fitness journey, or haven't even started it, they, you know, then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not doing that bad. I can keep pushing.
Yeah, somebody I know just recently started working out, and they're obviously not great at it. And they're like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't feel like I'm that good. I'm like, you just by working out every day, you just joined like the 2% of America. Like
Yep.
that's where you just became an elite, because I think it's like 2% or somewhere around 2% of Americans actually like work out daily.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, don't be embarrassed. Like everyone sucks. I
Yeah.
suck at it. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, someone go watch me do an air squat or like a back squat or something. I'm like, oh man, your form's terrible. Like, yeah, I'm tracking because I suck at it, but I'm still gonna
Yeah.
go do it. So yeah, I mean, any person who, like, I don't care if you start from the couch and you put down the bag of potato chips and go out and start walking. Congratulations, right? You're on your journey to a better life. So sometimes it's terrible because sometimes people make fun of like overweight people in the gym. I'm like, why?
Yeah,
That
they're there.
person's in the gym. They're trying to make themselves better. You should walk up to them and congratulate them for like being awesome instead of making fun of them.
Yeah,
So
that I think actually that was one of the things I noticed too. Like whether it was at the Spartan races or at gyms or for social media, there's been kind of a shift in positivity around gym culture. There's always going to be the people that are like we said, want to live in their little box and are threatened by other people's success, that are going to try and bring people down and be like, oh, you're not doing this right, or oh, you look better before. Like, yeah, there's actually been a pretty good shift in like positivity on anybody coming out to the gym. That was one of the things that I really liked about the races. There was everything from people that were pushing 300 pounds, 350 pounds, to wounded vets, to people with I think I saw a blind person out there, with their seeing eye dog, to
yeah.
go and complete a 13-mile.
Well, it's like I just saw on the news the other day a guy with Down syndrome just completed an Ironman.
Yeah,
Like, hell yeah! I've done an Ironman. That's just not easy. And for a guy to take his time to one, not only train the guy, but then like to be with him through the whole thing, like that's awesome. That's awesome stuff right there.
yeah.
So
And especially surviving certain things, whether it's injury, something that would bring about any kind of PTSD, loss, anything like that. Scientifically speaking, working out makes you happier. And then
yeah, the oxytocin, serotonin, all those chemicals
yeah, and it's just
physically
like,
make your brain happier.
yeah, and like I know people can hear that and read it. We have the phones that give you instant access to all the information in the world, and yet we're still dumb. But you know, if people would just kind of get out and try different things, keep saying that was a big part in me, getting to a better place and then getting to a good place with dealing with my dad being gone. Because it's super easy to be negative about it and say, hey, well, that person's still here and they're an awful human being, or that person gets to see their grandkids, or they get to be there for this significant event. It's real easy to latch onto those things and get to a negative place. And that has its place in healing too.
Yeah,
Anger and, frustration and helplessness, and, fitness, athletics, and then specifically, like I said, kind of the slam dunk to it all was when I got, started to get into endurance, and, kind of had that thought. I was like, man, my dad probably would have enjoyed this, because one of my favorite things about endurance is that it takes patience.
yeah,
When you can't just go, get to getting on the first 5 miles of a half marathon, and then you got, a couple, you still got a couple left, and
yeah.
then
Still got a ways to go.
what have I done?
Yeah,
So it takes patience. And then, how you and me used to do, people would run out on the first like mile and a half or half mile, depending on the distance. And we'd be like, all
yeah.
right, bud, I'll see you later. And then you see them, a couple miles later.
Oh
That's,
yeah, people just taking off the very beginning. You're like, yep, I'll see you in like a mile, buddy.
yeah,
And then we're like run by, like, told you, like, sorry,
yeah,
sucker.
yeah. And then, with a smile on your face, you'd be like, well, told you.
Yeah, tried to warn you.
But yeah, that would have definitely appealed to him, for being patient and using up here more than it's obviously a big time physical event, but if you use your head, and you keep yourself occupied, little things like keeping your pace, like I never used to
Yeah,
do, like you yell at me about going too fast because I didn't know how to do it.
yeah,
But yeah, little things like that you start to pick up, and then you're like, oh, okay, all right, it makes it a little bit easier, this makes it a little bit easier, this makes it a little bit easier, and then you start to kind of combine all those things, and then yeah, that's what really kind of helped me tie it to the way my dad would have thought and the way he would have approached it. And yeah, that's something that I definitely would have enjoyed, sharing with him, because I'm sure he would have gotten into it, because he would never take me beating him lying down or being better at him.
oh yeah, yeah.
Or
He'd be like,
some
Aaron's doing this now. I got to get better at it.
like that. Well, now I got to go do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he probably would have found a way to beat me in his 60s, because there were a couple of those guys out there that
Oh yeah, yeah.
around 10, 11, had to have been 60 plus, passing me, just kept on chugging, like I said, smile on their face. It was like,
Yeah, that last ultra marathon I did, there was a guy. I don't know, we were 20 miles into it, and he was like 75 years old, and I was running next to him. I'm like, this is unreal. Like, this dude's double my age, and he's here running just as fast as I am. That's unreal.
Yeah, I sleep wrong these days, and I'm like, I got to change my workout because I'm just like I can't lift anything right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Wow.
it gets pretty ridiculous how quick that happens. Or I'll pick an event where I had to try and dust a bunch of the lieutenants that were around, and I did, but it hurt my feelings for the next couple of days, and had to hide in my office for a while.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get going too long, I know people's attention spans are a little bit shorter nowadays, and maybe they're listening to this at work. So we appreciate you coming on, Aaron, sharing your story. Your story, obviously losing your father young, I'm sure hits quite a few people out there listening. So I appreciate your story. I hope they appreciate your story, and hopefully we see you again on the podcast at some point. And
Yeah.
we can keep reaching the survivors, as I'm calling everybody out there, and hopefully give them, some words of inspiration so they can get through their day a little better.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely love it if telling my story and getting it out there, and maybe it'll click for somebody, and even if it helps one person, I would be absolutely honored and happy to have been here and share my story. So
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to figure out how to stop the recording, and then we'll get this all edited up, and we'll see what people's response is. So for everybody listening out there, appreciate your time. Obviously, subscribe, share, like, shameless plug. And the biggest thing is spread the word, because somebody out there needs to hear the message, so that they can kind of move on with their life and, find the closure that they need, just like Aaron did. So appreciate you guys. And like I close out every show, go to the gym.